This is Adam Watson.
Levon Baker.
You're listening to the Darkslinger Mafia podcast. So what have you been up to art-wise this week, Levon?
Lots of art for your kids.
Yeah?
Well, that's one thing.
I've noticed that.
Aside from that, not a whole lot. Basically just doing some sketches in my notebooks at work. Stuff to prepare for the EBM Inspiratu.
Yeah.
The one little comic that I did, that I showed you.
Okay, go ahead and tell the listeners about that. I think this is pretty damn funny. And maybe we'll post it on the Darkslinger Instagram page or something in a couple of days.
Sounds good. Yeah, I was actually going to scan it in last night and start coloring it, and I got distracted reading, so...
That's not a bad thing to be distracted by.
No, actually... So I read that weird Lily book that you gave me.
Oh, yeah, what'd you think of that? Lily was a independently produced graphic novel that I picked up at ECC... God, it had to be 8 years ago.
Holy crap.
Yeah, and I thought it looked kind of like Lenore or something along those lines. So
yeah.
I asked the guy who created it, I was like, hey, is this like Lenore? He just kind of shrugged his shoulders. He was like, well, I do like that kind of stuff, so probably. So
It was cool.
Yeah.
It was very...
See, I haven't read it since I got it 8 years ago. And I do recall liking it, but it actually is not something that stuck with me what it was actually about.
I honestly couldn't quite grasp that.
Okay, maybe that's why I couldn't explain it.
I don't know if spoilers are a big deal because it's an old book.
Spoilers aren't a big deal, and it's an independently produced book that may actually be hard to come by these days, so I'm not sure if spoilers even matter.
Yeah, looking online, there's an alternate first pressing that has a different cover that I'm going to be looking for because I actually enjoyed it enough to pick it up.
Right.
I think it was distributed through some kind of magazine called Straight Jacket Presents.
Oh, okay. I think Straight Jacket was just the name of their small press company.
Yeah, so like it came in like either a magazine or another comic-sized book that had different comic strips in it.
Right.
But it's not anywhere online that I could find like that you could purchase it.
Right.
But it was, I don't know. I think it's the older sister and the little boy are like going trick or treating on Halloween, and they go to an old lady's house and she like poisons them with sleeping pills.
Oh, that's right.
And then they wake up after getting hit by a car when they try to escape.
Right.
So she thinks she's dead, but she's not dead.
They're just in a which weird is why she's Lily, the dead little girl, or something like that. Yeah.
And it totally threw me off because like it starts off, you think, you know, she's just like in hell or whatever. And by the time they get to the mad scientist that has turned her brother into a huge pumpkin monster, he starts going into talks like a whole page worth of dialogue.
Right.
His monologue thing, going on about how it's wavelengths and, you know, different dimensions and stuff, and she just ended up going into a different one, and her spirit, which he uses some funky term for, is his ex-wife's that died, that he brought this huge monster that also has that spirit in it. And so he's going to try to put her spirit into Lily, and then they kill him.
Right.
And then they try to get the little boy back to normal, and then that's the end of it, and there was nothing after that. There's no volume 2.
Yeah, that's the aggravating thing sometimes about like independent stuff. And it's one of the reasons it's hardest to sell stuff like cons and whatnot.
Yeah.
Is that if it's not a complete collection, people are a lot more afraid of something that's independently produced not being seen through to the end.
Right.
Than if they pick it up from like one of the mainstream publishers, which is kind of funny in a way. Because with mainstream publishers, you'll see tons of series featuring this character that were like 6 issues that were really critically acclaimed, but they couldn't get sales. So it got canceled, and then when that character was featured again, it never picked up with that storyline, you know?
Really?
There's tons of that.
I guess I could understand
like, there's a lot of unfinished Spider-Man story arcs, Batman, X-Men, you know?
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff out there, like, you know, they'd give this character their own little side series, and it was supposed to be an ongoing, but it became a mini, but it wasn't a mini that actually wrapped at the end, you know, and like, there was never any resolution, and maybe 20 years down the road, another writer might pick up that thread and play with it, but it'll never be what the original writer intended to have it be. That shit happens all the time with Marvel and DC, but I can see why people prefer to pick things up as standalone graphic novels for that reason. It's one of the most common questions I get asked with Who Will Save the World is this a one-and-done graphic novel, or are there going to be more that I have to hunt down later on?
Yeah.
And the people who ask that question after I answer it, that this is, you know, it's all that'll ever exist a story. bam, they'll pick it up.
Right.
There are people who actually want the ongoing tale, like, oh, that didn't leave me with enough, I want more.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
it seems like, there's a lot of people who are just afraid that independently produced stuff isn't going to have any resolution. I can get it.
Right. No, I mean, it ended in a way that it's not really necessary to read anything more than that. And I don't think he even really says to be continued. He uses some other weird form of that to, insinuate, oh, yeah.
It could be continued, but probably not.
Yeah. I mean, it was cool, but the one thing that bugs me was the inconsistent art style.
That really bothers me in things. There have been a few of my books that have had that, but...
Yeah. But this is pretty drastic.
Yeah, it's really drastic to where you can't tell what character is what from one page to the next, right?
Yeah, it was like, it almost went from a Jonan Vasquez, Roman Dirge style to Courage the Cowardly Dog's, like, weird CGI.
Right.
But it was still hand-drawn, it was just, they used a lot of brushing.
Yeah, it was bizarre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was cool. And then it would go to, like, these really detailed, really dark graphic novel style, like, very distinct lines with lots of shading and, like, little bits and pieces of, like, speckling and stuff, and I was like...
Right.
I couldn't keep up with the art, but once I just kind of got past that after, like, 5 pages, I was like, it's cool. It is what it is. I enjoyed it. So, yeah, I read that. I read the Egor book that you picked up at Sasquatch for me.
Okay. How was that?
That one really doesn't have a lot of dialogue, period.
Okay.
And I believe it's a one-off thing.
Okay.
Because they make jokes throughout the entire book that it's just about the book.
Okay.
So like, it starts up with the ending, and then there's like a part where, like, I think it's like 4 or 5 pages in, they find out that they're reading the comic or whatever, and they're like, oh, well, we're here for your funeral. And you're like, what the hell are you talking about? He's not even dead.
So it had, like, a self-referential thing going on, like rubber? Yeah, to the point
where, like, one page is literally them holding open the comic book.
Okay.
And then it just shows their arms
You've seen the movie Rubber, right?
Yeah.
Did it feel like that? Like, it was totally that self-referential? Like that. Okay. Okay.
But it was enjoyable. Like I said, not a lot of dialogue, but I kind of felt like it was almost EBM style.
Okay.
Very self-aware of its humor. It was hilarious.
Well, hey, that book only cost a quarter.
Yeah, so I was totally into it. I mean, I was thinking it was a kid's book.
I did too, by the cover.
It is totally not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's got a lot more intense... Like, it says it's a romance.
Did it feel like one?
To an extent. I mean, the little Egor's in love with a pig girl that her soul and skeleton is ripped out of her body. And then, like, the magician just keeps, like, killing her over and over. Because
Interesting.
Yeah, it was weird, but I thought it was cute. There's, like, a part where, like, he, like, stabs her in the chest. Like, Egor stabs the little pig girl. Whose name was Muffin Doll.
So he's in love with the little pig girl in it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So he, like, stabs her in the chest and, like, rips her heart out. And then opens his chest and lets a fucking rat crawl out of it because all these rats are inside of him. He has a cheese heart.
Okay.
And he transfers a rat into her chest so that they can be, like, connected. It was so dorky, but it was cute.
That is cute. Yeah. I like that kind of thing. Have you ever read The Motherless Oven? I
have not.
Okay. It's probably my favorite of the weird, can't describe type comics that I've read. It's a graphic novel that I think was put out by First Second, if I remember right. And I think Rob G. was a writer on it, I think, who did a series called Teenagers from Mars back in the day. It was a really good series. But Motherless Oven is this really weird story about these kids who live in this world where their parents are little machines. So it's like talking automatic salt and pepper, and that's like their parents. Like, they talk about their parents all the time, and their parents are all just these weird little talking machines. And then they have weather clocks that tell them if they should be outside or not, and all the weather that happens in this world is like knives start falling from the sky, so like obviously you're not going to be outside in a knife storm.
Yeah.
Or, just weird shit like that. And so I read that thing clear to the end, like hoping for some resolution. And when I didn't get any, I was actually happier than I would have been had I got some.
Yeah.
So the story ends every bit as weird as it begins. And you got to go into it just being totally prepared for how fucking bizarre it is. But if you like bizarre, it works really well.
Yeah.
So,
dude, that's awesome.
You should check that one out.
Definitely.
It's really good. Most of the stuff First Second has published is really good. One of my least favorite things by them was actually written by a friend of mine. So, so I don't want to mention it by name, but it was the only book that I read last year that I gave up on halfway through, and I felt like an ass.
Oh.
Because it was one of my friends who did it.
That's understandable.
And the artwork was really good.
Yeah.
The story was just shit, but for the most part, First Second puts out some really good shit.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that one out.
Not much of it being weird. I would say there's a lot of experimentalness with the stuff they publish, but The Mother of the Seven is definitely one that I'm pretty positive it was put out by First Second. Could be wrong on that.
Yeah.
But in any case, it was very, very bizarre, and I think it'd be right up your alley for things you'd enjoy.
Sweet.
So go ahead and tell us about the little comics story you were doing.
Totally
at your work
detoured
yesterday.
from that.
Yep, we sure did. That happens.
Yeah, so there's a scene in the movie Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny where Jack Black goes into Kyle's apartment.
Right.
And he's looking around and he's talking about how he's in his own little Kyle Gass project band. And Jack asks if he can audition, and so he does his little 10-second clip of a Ronnie James Dio song. And then he's just staring at him blankly. And Jack's like, "It's a Ronnie James Dio song." And Kyle says, "Yeah, I know. I helped write it. I know all the guys from Sabbath." You don't know Dio? So, basically, the comic... So I was sitting at work the other night, and I don't know why that randomly popped into my head. But I was thinking about how it seems like every time we hang out, we'll be talking about something. So, we got a Sasquatch, we went to Wenatchee, and every time, we'll be talking about a book, and I'll be like, "Oh man, have you heard of this?" And you're just like, "Yeah, I know that guy. He helped fund my Kickstarter. Oh, we hung out at this con because he was sitting next to me." So the comic is basically just a little parody of that Tenacious D scene, but involving us with Adam's knowledge of comics.
So it's important to note that with all those people that I know, that's what happens when you've been around in the industry for as long as I have,
Right. No, and I know that you don't literally know everyone.
No, I don't, but I've done signings that have featured, damn near everybody, so it feels like I do half the time.
Yeah, well, and I think it's just your knowledge of everything comics. It's we could talk about anything, and I'll be like, "Oh, have you ever heard of this book?" And you're like, "Oh, yeah, it came out in this year, and it was published by this guy. It ran for this long. These 4 artists worked on it, but this one got kicked off because he wasn't good enough."
So I have an encyclopedic knowledge.
Exactly, and it's so awe-striking to me. And so, every time we're, talking about that kind of stuff, it just makes me holy crap, just teach me everything you know.
Yeah, and you think it's bad with me, just wait till you're in the same room with me, Alan, and Tony.
Yeah.
It's like at the barbecues, between the 3 of us, we pretty much have every era of comics covered.
Well, and I think it's also the fact that you're friends with all these comic creators. Whether they're, big name people or independents.
Right.
To me, I don't know anyone like that.
It's thing when you start creating comics and you start going to these cons, where it's there's so many different types of people at them, and there's lots of people at Comic Cons who, honestly, I don't want to go get a beer with or whatever, right?
Right.
But then you start meeting these people, and it's like Tony, Alan, Jason, Randy, all these guys I know. You start to become legit friends with them because had you grown up with them, they would have been your tribe, right? And so it's oh my God, we've waited our whole lives to meet each other, but didn't know it until now. Yeah. You know what I mean? So then, before you know it, your con friends are your real friends. They're these people you're calling all the time, but they're calling you, you go help them move, they need a couch to sleep on for a few months, whatever, right? Yeah. So, so before you know it, you've met, legit friends who you're really friends with. And that's a side effect that you don't always expect. It just happens, Yeah. But it's, the comic industry is very cliquey in that way. Right. Because it's at Stumptown a few years ago, all of us guys who made horror that showed at Stumptown are put in the front row, as everybody's walking in, and we're all friends. Yeah. So it's Lucas Kettner, who did Witch Doctor under Robert Kirkman's imprint, and now he's gone on to do covers for Hellraiser and all kinds of shit. Him and Brandon Seifert, who were doing Witch Doctor at the time, me, Alan, Tony, Jason, and Neo Trash Comics, we're all in this row, right? We're all already friends, and we all know each other. Right. So I'm talking to Cable, the guy who was running it that year, who we all knew. I'm like, hey, it's pretty cool. We all lucked out into having, like, this strip that's just like us. And he's like, that wasn't an accident. That didn't just happen. I'm like, oh, it didn't? He's like, no, I knew that, having you guys right here would make all you guys happy. And if you guys were happy, like, sales would be good going around the rest of the show because you guys are happy. You're going to be spreading the happiness, like, right from the get-go. People walk in, they have a good experience. And he's like, and all you guys are just, like, telling jokes the whole time. And he's like, and all your stuff works well together.
Yeah.
He's like, so I arranged you guys like this. And it's like, oh, it makes total sense,
Dude, that's awesome, though.
The better shows will pay attention to stuff like that. Like, I've had more shows in the past 2 years ask me who I want to be near or who I want to be away from than I ever had at the beginning of my career. And I don't know if that's just con runners becoming more aware, wanting less fighting going on at their show, But I think it's a great thing. I think if you're running a show, you should always ask questions like that.
Definitely.
And I'm always...
Who knows who, so...
Right, I'm always telling the con runners who actually know me, I'm just joking, that, like, don't put me anywhere near Ben, because Ben's one of my best friends.
Yeah.
And then they'll be like, why do you want to be near Ben? I'm like, he'll make me run his table half the time. But then they get that I'm joking. Right. And so, of course, Ben and I end up right next to each other. It's just kind of one of those things that happen, some of the best friends I'll ever have in my life.
Yeah.
I met this way. Like,
That's awesome.
Ty, I met at a Comic-Con. Ben was with him at that Comic-Con. Met them both at the same time. Alan Bennett, Black Box Comics, met him through Comic-Cons. Tony Morgan, met him at a Comic-Con, then we ended up working together, and like, he's been out to my house several times, I've been to his, like, all these people are, like, legit family to me,
right?
Now, and it's funny because you don't expect that to happen, and then when you finally meet these people, some of your other friends that you actually grew up with, you start spending less and less time with, which sucks in a way, but in other ways, like, these people get what you're trying to do.
Right.
And are more supportive of it than these people you grew up with who are just like, oh, you're such a fucking dork.
No, I think that's awesome. I think one of the biggest things that really gets me with that is that, like, when we go through your comics and stuff, you're always passing me your friends' books. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I know you, and I have your books. But aside from that, I don't really know anyone that even writes comics or draws them.
Right.
And if they are, they're like the one guy that's on DeviantArt that posts, like,
right.
his, like, fan comic once a day or something like that.
Well, now you know Alan Bennett. You met him when we went out with him.
And,
he does his own comics.
Alan was great.
Yeah, and, you really haven't met anybody else yet, have you?
Nope.
But you will.
Yeah. I mean, it's all a, thing that it's going to take time to do, but I'm excited. They all seem like cool people from everything you've told me, and
right.
I don't know, it gets me excited knowing that I'm going to meet all these people that, like, actually have their books published.
Right.
It's like you could hand me something that's completely terrible, and the fact that it's printed and, like, actually, being given
that
out
they
or
saw
sold.
It through to that.
Yeah,
end.
it's like, oh my god, that's so cool.
Yeah, and that's what we all pretty much think is, even if we turn out one or two bad works, at least we have the balls to see it through to the end.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a fucking badass thing when you think about it.
Definitely.
So speaking of your art, how's the t-shirt image coming along? Have you had any time to work on that?
I haven't had a whole lot of time to work on it. I made notes, and I'm trying to work out how to switch the two drawings on it that wouldn't work.
Okay.
I'm trying to give it some really good thought. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, I do it at work. Mm-hmm. I sit there and sketch a little bit. And it just wasn't coming out right. So I think it's one of those things that I'm going to need to wait until my son goes home.
Okay.
To his mom's. That way I can sit in my bedroom with the light directly on the panels, and I can look through the book.
And you can focus without a kid coming up every 10 seconds. I completely get that.
Because, I mean, the night that I did it, the first time, I think it took about 2-3 hours to get just that initial sketch down.
Right.
And then, actually pencil it in and stuff. So I need to figure out what I can do to tweak it just a little bit. Mm-hmm. And based on the notes that you gave me, what's going to work and what won't.
Right.
So I'm thinking in the next week or two, it should at least have the pencil done. Let you approve it, tell me what you think. I don't want to take too long with it because,
Well, you can take as much time as you need to.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure it'll still be relevant.
This isn't something that needs to be posted on the website at X time or anything like that.
Right.
So, you know.
Yeah, I just don't want to be like that guy that, like, oh, hey, can you do this? And I do, like, one drawing, and I'm like, here, check it out. And you're like, oh, well, here's the notes. You know, this is what I think we should change. I agree with it. And then I'm just like, I push that to the side.
That does happen occasionally. You will find that with some artists that you hire. But, you know, that's just kind of a, you know, who to hire the next time and who not to sort of thing. You know?
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the stuff that I've been drawing over the last 2 weeks since I had shown you that is mostly stuff at work.
Right.
I mean, it's pitch black out in the shack that I have to sit
right.
in.
And you're just, like, sketching away. And
yeah, practicing. It's like I'm not going to do anything that's, you know, important.
Right.
It's like if I just draw some random doodle or, like, ink it, it's like if it looks like crap when the lights are on, then...
Big deal.
Not too concerned about it.
Right. Yeah, so... Still have the same convention announcements. So coming up next is going to be the Frankenstein comic book swap. And then Hillsborough Author Days in September and Rustorama in July. So I need to add some more cons. But just to remind the audience, that's going to be our next confirmed appearances. So,
sweet.
Yeah. So we got that. And I've had absolutely no time to work on the coloring for Chronicles Von Helsing. I need to work on that or hire somebody to color it because I would really love to launch the Kickstarter for the hardcover of that as soon as I get Ghost Assassin all wrapped up.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, still a few printer delays, but I'm hoping I may have to do an update on Monday, depending on what they say, and just say, you know, looks like it's going to be about 2 weeks past the expected delivery date, and I hope that's not problematic for any of the backers. I don't foresee it being any more than that. But, you know, there were just a few glitches with what ink works on the print-on-demand side, which is what I'm more used to.
Right.
And the offset print side, which I've had far less experience in.
Yeah.
So, you know, kind of pain in the ass, but I'm getting it worked out, and I'm working with the printers and making sure that I'm doing everything right, and I want to deliver the best quality product possible. So
exactly, and in that
hopefully that shows through when everybody's holding it in their hands.
Yeah, and in the end, that's what's most important is that you deliver exactly what they're gonna want.
Right. But speaking of Kickstarters, right now, my buddy Sam Quinton is running a Kickstarter for a D&D weapons book. Cannot think of the name at the moment, but I will put the link to it in the show notes if it's something everybody's interested in checking out. And we will have him coming up a little later this month for an interview where he's talking about it, and we'll still have plenty of time left on the Kickstarter. I'm going to try and get him on as soon as I possibly can.
Very cool. So what's going on with EBM?
So I just posted page number 14 this week. So far with issue number 4, we have not missed a single solitary week's update, and we won't because all the pages are fully done. So I wish that I had time to sit down and letter the whole thing at once, but I keep having to letter it like 2 to 3 pages at a time, or even sometimes 1 page at a time, like right before I post it, just because of how little time I've had lately.
Right.
But the whole issue for number 4 is fully complete, with the exception of lettering on some of the pages. And I have a cover as well, so I still have, 8 more weeks worth of updates with that because it posts once a week, and Gabriel has already turned in all the roughs for issue number 5. They've all been approved. He sent me the rough for the cover today.
Yeah.
Which I can't talk about what the cover is because it's got a big reveal in it. And I'll probably, actually, since he's getting it done first, I'll probably do something that's only been done once in EBM history. And that's to post the cover before I start posting pages. I almost always post, like, the pages and then the cover. But this time I think I'm actually going to be able to post the cover and then the pages. So, we still got about 8 weeks before I need the first couple of pages. I don't foresee that being a problem. Him and Marco is a really fast colorist. Gabriel seems to be really fast at finishing detail and all that, so I would expect I'll be getting some pages for that starting in the next couple weeks, 4 weeks probably at the latest.
Nice.
So, issue number 5, we'll stay on track to keep updating at the same schedule we're going, so really and truly, I should really get issue number 6 fully written. That is something that I have a lot of stuff, like notes-wise and everything.
Yeah.
But I've had no time to sit down and write, and there are several scripts that I have to sit down, bust through, and get done, but not make them look like they've been busted through.
Right. No, that's totally understandable. You have a very tight
Usually,
schedule.
though, when I sit down to do something, I can actually get a script fully written out in less than a day.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that it's no different for that. Like, I have the El Bovine Morte and Speratu story pretty much mapped out in my head.
Yeah.
So all I got to do is just sit down and just work out the nuances.
Makes sense.
It's not usually that difficult for me to work out the nuances, especially in, like, the humor books like this. And, you know, but I feel bad for Patrick because I've been working on the script for Little Lame Mime and the Mini Slingers Christmas story for months now, but just have not had a chance to just sit down and just complete the damn thing. But I'm 2 pages away from having it complete.
Right.
It's so close. I think I can do it like either tonight or tomorrow. I don't think it's going to be problematic. Then I can get that to him finally, and then we'll have that all ready to start posting in Christmas. El Bovine Morte, totally on schedule. Little Lame Mime and the Mini Slingers doesn't quite have a schedule yet. But the next post that will be for sure posted for it is we have a Schools Out pinup that is fantastic. Homage to Giant Size X-Men #1. It shows how parents feel when their kids get out of school, which I know that one. And and so, you know, that's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll have an update schedule for that announced sometime later this year. But until we actually have a few issues in the can, I don't want to say, like, you know, it's for sure going to be posting every single week.
Right.
At the moment, it's just kind of laying the foundation, getting it ready, you know, that kind of stuff. But in any case, EBM is on solid ground. Everything's moving along with that really fast. And then, you know, after we get started on Speratu, we're just going to have to decide what the release schedule is like for that.
Right.
You know, I release EBM on Wednesdays, Little Lame Mime on Fridays, so maybe that'll be like our Thursday or Tuesday book.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Sounds good.
In any case, you know, it's everything's looking good. Everything's on track. It's just, you know, dealing with the offset printers and that kind of stuff takes some time. But, you know, all in all, everything's going pretty well. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what we got.
Yeah, me too.
Well, I bet you're the one writing it all.
Right. Yep, I'm also the one writing out the checks for it all. Which sometimes, like, Jesus Christ, I could have bought 12 cars by now.
Oh my god.
Feels that way.
Yeah. So, with the Ghost Assassin #1, do you have anything planned for the release of that?
For issue #1?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do, but I don't have anything firm yet. I'm going to try to set up a release party. And, like, a little mini signing tour around, like, the Portland-Salem area. But I need to wait. I don't want to do it after I get the copies in. I want to wait until I see if Diamond is actually going to be carrying this. So, I know the shops I'm going to hit up either way. But if Diamond passes on it for some reason, and they might, because even though I feel it's a fantastic piece of work, and so does everybody else who's read it, you know, they seem to think the same thing. Diamond still may not have faith just based off the fact that they don't know who I am or something like that, you know. So I'm planning a signing tour for that. I'm actually going to, as I go more into this year, I will of course be adding more conventions, but one of the things I'm actually hoping to add more of is comic shop signings. Comic shop signings come in really handy because you don't pay anything besides gas for them.
Right.
You can actually make quite a bit at them. Sometimes you can make more than you make at a convention.
Really?
Doing them. Yeah, it's not uncommon to. First couple of times I did Free Comic Book Day, I made something like 150 more than what I did for Stumptown.
Damn.
Yeah. And that was when Free Comic Book Day was a new thing and people were really super excited about it and everybody came out in droves. And it's not quite like that now. But they do like kind of a mini Free Comic Book Day for Halloween called the Halloween Comic Fest.
Right.
Where they give out free Halloween editions. And I want to see if I can get one of those set up and, you know, just do some various stuff like that. So
nice. I'm going to assume this is what we were talking about when you had said that you were going to be hitting up different comic shops for something that you had planned out.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Very
it
cool.
is.
I don't know if that was mentioned on a podcast or if that was just between us when we were driving to
It's
Free
hard
Comic Book
to
Day.
say.
So aside from that, with the Chronicles hardcover that's coming out, is it complete? Like, is the series done, or is it still be ongoing?
This is the first volume. So it's going to first be released in hardcover format, and then later on I'll be releasing it in softcover format. But this is the first volume in what will probably be somewhere between 9 and 15 volumes. It's really tough to say exactly how many there are, but this is actually... Chronicles Von Helsing is the biggest story, most likely. Principalities might end up being bigger.
Yeah.
But Chronicles Von Helsing is probably the biggest story that I've told, and I have it mapped out pretty well up to, like, issue number 30, 35 at this point.
Damn.
And I know exactly how the whole series ends. I've written the last page of it already. But it's getting there that takes all the work. And since Chronicles Von Helsing is following a whole family, not just, a few characters, it's going to take a whole lot more time to tell the whole story. So, in addition to the main series, there's also going to be little branch-off side stories, like the Sally mini-comic I released. It was only 7 pages. It was illustrated by Joel Kotajar with a cover by Alan Bennett. And then Tony has actually written and drawn, and it's nearly complete, a Jeannie Marie story called Blood Will Out. And that's going to be a one-shot. At some point in the future, we will be releasing an anthology comic that's going to be called Eternal Bastard. And when I looked at anthology comics and saw why some of them succeeded and some of them failed, one of the things I kept coming back to was there wasn't a hook.
Right.
Like Marvel Comics Presents went, 150 issues or something like that?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest hooks in it was, if you liked Wolverine, you knew he was going to appear in this comic, right?
Right.
And maybe sometimes Wolverine stories are really good, and maybe sometimes they're really shit. That doesn't matter. You still knew if you really liked Wolverine, he was going to be in there.
Right.
So I do care about the quality. I don't want to put anything in there that's shit. But one of the ideas I've had for quite some time was that in addition to the Chronicles Von Helsing main series, that's, Robert and Ezekiel, and, like, them finding out things about the family and all that.
Right.
That Eternal Bastard is going to feature these 4 to 12 page Chronicles Von Helsing stories that will feature other family members, things like that. And so those will be ultimately collected in the hardcovers and the trades, things like that.
So then on that, my question is, because the hardcover is going to be colored, are the soft formats also going to be colored?
Yes.
Will the rest of the series continue with being in color? Or are you
it will continue being in color.
Like a side thing?
It's going to continue in color.
Very cool.
At first, it worked pretty well in black and white. But there are things that I'm looking at, and I'm like, this would have been more clear had it been colored.
Right.
And when I buy comics, I have a very strong preference towards color.
Yeah.
So I don't see why I shouldn't just release in the format that I prefer,
Right.
I mean, there are, of course, exceptions to that. Like, I actually like the black and white editions of Bone more than I do the color Scholastic versions. There's always going to be exceptions, but for the most part, color is what I prefer to read in. And when I look at the Chronicles pages that have been colored versus those that are still black and white, the difference to me is very palpable. So I'm like, that's what I want to do. So I'm not going to release the single issues in black and white anymore. They're going to be color right from the get-go.
Nice. So it's kind of almost like a reset. You're
kind
going
of
back
in
and
ways.
recoloring
And
the
because
first
of that,
then...
like when I wrote the first Chronicles Von Helsing storyline, it was actually supposed to be a graphic novel.
Yeah.
And so I didn't design it to be released in single issue format, but art schedules and all that and wanting to get it released what it was kind of a thing where it was like, well, you've already written an episodic format, so why not release it in trade paperback form, and then we can do a graphic novel of it at some point, right? That made a lot of sense to me, but since that one was meant to be a graphic novel, I just consider those first 5 issues in the Sally story to be volume 1.
Yeah.
Going forward, I'm not a big fan of relaunches, like constant #1s, that kind of shit.
Right.
But going forward, I am going to do a volume 2 that's going to start with issue #1, and then from there, I'm never going to renumber it again.
Yeah.
And part of the reason I'm doing that is because with volume #2, I'm actually looking at distributing it in a much bigger way. And so I want people to have the opportunity to buy, issue #1 with the hardcover. So I'm going to be releasing issue #1 of volume 2 within weeks of the hardcover dropping. So that's a plan.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I'm excited about that.
Yeah, it should be pretty cool. So speaking of Chronicles Von Helsing, so one of the things we've talked about is doing some parodies of famous vampire covers and posters and things like that with Inspiratu.
Right.
And we both kind of came to the conclusion at the same time that we should parody my vampire comic. Because, hey, if you already have a vampire comic and it's going to get parodied, you might as well be the one that does it, right?
Exactly.
with Inspiratu, so why don't you talk about doing those?
So that started when I, like you said, I had come up with the idea to start doing some parodies of movie covers. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know how you would react with me parodying your own stuff. So I didn't mention it until
hey, if anybody's going to make fun of my stuff, it should be me.
Exactly. Well, and as soon as you mentioned that, you're like, oh, and, feel free to, parody my stuff. I don't mind.
Right.
I was like, okay, so I'm in the clear, and that's when I, immediately had sent you that message. I was like, well, I already sketched one out.
Right.
So, yeah, basically it's just taking the covers and just totally going crazy with them.
Yeah,
with
the first one you parodied isn't just a cover of one of the comics. It's also my right arm.
Very true. So, so that one I don't know if I should touch on because we had discussed the character that's on the cover. That one.
Yeah, okay.
And we hadn't really mentioned much about that.
We'll wait until, because that is a reveal, we'll wait for that.
Aside from that...
But the cover we're talking about is issue number 5.
Right.
And that's what I have tattooed on my right arm. So that's also what that reference meant.
Yeah. So aside from that one, I'm still trying to figure out a couple of them.
Mm-hmm. Issue number 1 is a skull that has a stake in it, and it's got a garlic clove hanging out the mouth. The mouth's kind of dangling open like it's, rotting, basically. Yeah. Issue number 2 is what people call a werewolf, but what no one ever takes into account is that in Bram Stoker's Dracula, vampires could transform into wolves.
Right.
So when they call it a werewolf cover, I kind of just go with it at cons. Because I don't like explaining the whole thing. And yes, I will admit there's an element where it's just easier to sell. But the wolf is actually supposed to be a form vampires can take.
Right.
Because it wasn't just werewolves. Werewolves are cursed. Vampires can choose to change into creatures of the night.
Yeah.
So wolves are something they can turn into. So that's what the cover of that has always meant to be. It is a vampire wolf, not a werewolf.
Yeah.
But I'm okay with people thinking that. And there was a guy years ago who ran the werewolf convention here in Portland. And he bought that and he was all really excited about it. I'm like, well, I do have to tell you, this is not a werewolf. This is actually a vampire wolf. And he's like, close enough. I'm like, okay, well, if the guy who, does werewolf convention thinks that's cool with me.
They have a werewolf convention?
They did. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but it imploded. I know that it was done by the same guy that did I think it was called Sprocket Con. That was a steampunk convention.
Oh, okay.
He did both of those, and the Werewolf Con was HowlCon. I don't know exactly what happened with it. I just know that, the funding wasn't there for another year or something like that. It went for quite a few years. Really nice guy that put it on, but
yeah.
Like I said, I don't know any of the details, and it was actually one of the few conventions in this area that I never hit up. And when he's telling me about it, he's like, yeah, you get 25% people who are really hardcore werewolf, right?
Yeah.
And 25% that are they really love the classic Universal monsters, that kind of stuff. And about 25% that are into the really new horror and they're just kind of seeing what's new. And he said, and then about 25% of them are werewolf furries.
Okay, yeah.
And I was like, sense. Wait, there's a whole subdivision of furries that are werewolves? He's like, oh yeah.
There's subdivisions of everything.
I know. But I guess I've seen guys in werewolf outfits at cons.
Right.
I guess I just never really stopped to think they might actually be furries. Because to me, they're just cosplayers, right?
Right.
And most of the time, you can kind of tell the difference between the cosplayers and the furries when they're walking around.
Yeah, generally their masks are different.
Generally, but I guess not always.
Yeah. That is a good point.
Yeah. It's just kind of one of those things where, I'm like, oh, cosplayer. Well, maybe furry. Well, here, it's definite. These are the subdivision werewolf furries who are going to this con. I don't know if it's defined date or anything like that. I don't want to say that, but I kind of want to say that because I kind of think that's what's going on.
Well, yeah, if you go to a con and you're looking for someone to date, you're generally looking for someone that has similar interests.
Right, especially if you're into something like furry.
Yeah, so that's a good way to meet someone.
Yeah, because it's probably not the easiest conversation in the world. Hey, what do you want to do tonight? Well, what I'd really like to do is if you dressed up like a donkey. And I dressed up like a hippopotamus, and then you just fuck the shit out of me. I don't imagine that's an easy conversation in the dating world. Dating is tough enough already. So, so I can get why people would go to conventions looking for that.
Yeah.
That being said, I guess I didn't think about it because there are furry conventions.
Right.
So I just thought anybody who was dressed up like an animal at a Comic-Con was a cosplayer.
Yeah.
But I've been told recently that's not the case. So,
Yeah.
I'm not going to take the time to learn all that, though, honestly. Either somebody wants to come up and buy a book from my table or they don't, and I can give a shit if they're dressed up or they're not. So,
Exactly.
yeah, exactly. I'm not into furry stuff. So, but if you are, hey, cool, good for you,
Right.
Doesn't hurt me just because you want to do it.
Exactly.
So, but don't expect me to understand if you're a cosplayer or furry is what I'm saying.
That's one of those things, like, I only really comment on people's outfits if I know what the character is 100%.
Right.
Or if I'm just like, hey, that's a cool outfit.
Right.
Like, that way I don't feel like an ass for being like, oh, nice fursuit.
Right.
I'm not into furries.
Yeah, there was this guy who goes to KripCon every year, and I do not think he's a furry. I think he's a horror cosplayer. But he has the most badass animal costume I've ever seen in my life. It's this werewolf with, like, these demon wings that, like, pop out and actually extend.
Holy crap.
And, it's just super badass, and what he does is he'll walk around the show as just himself for a while.
Yeah.
And then he'll walk around in this werewolf outfit. I don't know if it's because of the heat, because that thing has to be massively hot.
That's what I would assume.
Or what, but he came up to Alan and really loved his scratchboard stuff and commissioned him to do his outfit, because apparently when he finds artists who he really likes, he commissions them to draw his character. And in the way he phrased it was, this is my original character.
Right.
So that also told me he probably wasn't a furry. He was a cosplayer, because I think that's more like the language, I think. But in any case, Alan's like, well, what does it look like? And so later on, he came by all our tables, and he's wearing this outfit, and it's like this fucking satanic demon from hell beast werewolf thing. And I'm like, oh, that is fucking pimp. But
that sounds amazing.
It is. It's really cool. And so far, I have yet to do a KripCon he's not at. So,
Dang.
Yeah. But I imagine that thing is a nightmare if you have to clean it.
Oh, God.
All that fur everywhere. And
that makes me wonder how they wash fursuits. Like,
I would assume that you probably just get some sort of dry cleaning done to it. I would assume, but I don't know.
That makes sense.
There's a lot of stuff we wear that's not easy to clean. My leather jacket's not easy to clean, which is why it looks like it hasn't been. Is because it hasn't been.
Well, and I think that's probably why I'm assuming that, is because I know most of my costumes, unless they're just clothes that I put together, they don't get washed. They get sprayed with some kind of disinfectant because I don't want to risk it.
If you're just looking to take the smell out of something, you can actually just rub vodka onto it.
Really?
Yeah. You just take vodka that's not any sort of flavored vodka.
Right. And
something that's kind of like middle shelf, it doesn't have to be like high end, but something that has less impurities like sugar and shit like that.
Yeah.
And you just put vodka on like a little spot on a rag and just kind of dab at a costume. It'll remove the smell and kill a lot of the bacteria in it.
Really?
So yeah, it's actually a theater trick.
That's pretty cool.
So a lot of times when you go to like the movie houses, and the costumes have to be worn every single night, and they can't be washing them every single night, they'll get rubbed down with vodka. Either at the end of the night or the next day to remove all the smell so the actor is not walking around in a completely stinky ass outfit.
Right. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I know that because my aunt was super, super huge into play. And she was an actor on like the Portland circuit and told us all this shit when we were kids. So, a lot of it's seeded in my brain and I remember it. But yeah, I've kept that in mind because, times that I have spilled vodka on myself, which has happened. Yeah. I'm like, hey, that part of my clothes doesn't stink, but everything else does. I smell like a day old drunk.
That's awesome.
So, but yeah, that's actually one experience you've partaken in that I have not. Where I've been to cons with like vampire teeth in, things like that.
Right.
I've never actually done the full on cosplay.
Yeah.
I can honestly say I didn't even comprehend what it was about until someone cosplayed as one of my characters.
Yeah.
And the first time it happened, I felt like such a dick. Because, Robert Von Helsing, he's got a cowboy hat, and, he looks like a cowboy, and so it's not the easiest costume to identify, right?
Right.
and this 15-year-old kid comes walking to my table, and the hat he was wearing was completely flat-brimmed. Robert doesn't wear a taco style, but, it's kind of upturned.
Right.
And I saw that, and I'm like, hey, no, that's pretty cool Indiana Jones cosplay. Because I thought that's what he was.
Yeah.
He had, like, the outfit on, but he had vampire teeth in. And Robert doesn't have vampire teeth.
Right.
So I was like, cool, you made Indiana Jones a vampire. Oh, I'm not Indiana Jones, I'm Robert Von Helsing. I'm like, oh, shit. Well, hey, that's fucking awesome. You decided to come as my character. How cool is that, right?
Yeah.
And that was the first time it happened, and then a few months after that, I had a guy hit me up who was really, really excited because he had never seen a independent comic character that he actually wanted to dress up as that started out being black.
Yeah.
So he was a black cosplayer, and most of the characters he had to choose from were all these Marvel and DC guys, and he got tired doing it because everybody did it.
Right.
And, he would do stuff like dress up like, Captain America or something like that, and he looked really cool. But he was so excited because, like, oh my god, this character started out as black. He wasn't just all of a sudden black one day because they needed a new black character at Marvel or DC, which happens all the fucking time.
Right.
And he's like really badass looking from the start. And this guy was actually a pretty big dude. And, the popper is drawn as being this really big guy. So to see that and, like, see him be this big, massive, cool-looking dude from the start and having, like, the 90s trench coat. So it was, like, this style of comics he liked, all this kind of shit. He was so excited, and he's like, could you send me kind of, like, the best of the character designs? Would there be any way you could do that? Because I'd like to really make the costume based off of the initial, like, designs, and he sent me pictures when the costume was all done. Unfortunately, I never got to see it in real life.
Yeah.
Because he's an East Coast cosplayer. But I was just like, man, how fucking cool is that this means this much to him, that this character exists.
Yeah.
And he wants to cosplay as him, and he's this level of excited, and he's read the comic, and he loves it, and all that. I think Popper shit, because it was the first one I ever put out, so maybe I'll get...
enjoyed it, though.
Well, yeah, so. and I think it'll be a lot more enjoyable when I get the chance to fully retell the story.
Right. That's awesome.
But those were the experiences that I was like, okay, I actually fully get what this is about, because now I'm on the opposite end.
Right.
Where, people are actually dressing up as my character. That's fucking cool. But I always tell the kids I'm going trick-or-treating as David. His whole outfit is, t-shirt and black leather jacket. And I wear a black leather jacket whenever it's cold out.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm David from Ghost Acid. Well, no, you're not, Dad. You don't have blonde hair. You're wearing a beanie. You have a goatee.
I'm taking liberties with it.
Right? It's my character. I can alter it. And David wears costumes in the book, so leave me alone, kids.
There you go. Maybe that's what it's going to look like in the next issue.
Right?
You don't know
could
this.
Could be something he dresses up as to go do a hit. You don't know. Only I know.
He might not appear like that in the comic, but that's how he appeared in my head the first time I thought about him.
What totally is not true, but...
Yeah, but the kids don't know that.
No. But the funny thing is of all of my characters, he's the one who does look the most like I used to. Because he's got the Caesar hairdo, and it's like blonde. And back in 1997, way before Eminem hit the scene, I had a Caesar do with bleach blonde hair.
Right.
And, and he's always wearing a leather jacket. I always wear a leather jacket. Like, all the stuff. They say that you create yourself every time you create a new character. I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
Because, like, Lame Mime is not me. No matter what people want to see, he's not me.
Yeah.
The Popper is not me. Robert Von Helsing might be a little bit me. Ezekiel Von Helsing definitely is not. But David is a lot closer to being me. And so I created him, and then when Charles Carvalho did the original design, he added in a few elements that looked like him.
Yeah.
That I noticed, right? And one of my friends comes in to buy the comic, and she comes up, and she's looking at it. She really hated Eminem at the time. And she looks at it, she's like, he looks like Eminem. Did you have this look like him? I'm like, no, just because he's got a blonde Caesar haircut doesn't make him.
Yeah.
Well, he does. He looks like Eminem. I don't know if I'll like this comic. She ended up loving it, but...
That's hilarious.
Yeah, it was pretty fucking funny. So, yeah. So, with that, I think that we've rambled on for long enough for this week.
Definitely.
So, join us next week for another episode of the Darkslinger Mafia podcast. I think next week is most likely when we're going to have Sam Quinton on. So, that's it for this week. I'm Adam Watson.
Levon Baker.
Thank you for listening.